Hi, and welcome into another edition of the Russell Street Report. I'm Tony Lombardi. The Ravens fell to 7-6 on the season after losing to the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead Stadium 27-24 in a heartbreaking defeat. But the Ravens still have hopes of winning the AFC North as they sit just a half game behind the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were upset by the Oakland Raiders in Oakland. So that leaves the Ravens a half game back at 7-6 to the Steelers 7-5-1. Odds makers think that by 8 o'clock on Sunday night, the Ravens will be in first place because the Ravens are 8-point favorites over the Tampa Bay Bucs, while the host Pittsburgh Steelers are running from a point to a 2.5-point underdog at Heinz Field. Speaking of the Steelers, former Steelers running back Rocky Bleier isn't very confident about the Steelers' chances. On 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh this Monday, Bleier said, and I quote, "With 3 games remaining, the Steelers' destiny lies in their hands, but it is shaky with the Patriots, Saints, and Bengals on the horizon. How they fare will dictate the team's future, and it may be without Mike Tomlin." Could it be that all 4 AFC North teams have new head coaches in 2019? Close to home, John Harbaugh continues to play cat and mouse with his starting quarterback. On Monday, John was coy again, sharing this with the media. "I think it stands to reason that if Joe is ready to go, then he'll be part of the game plan. He's too good of a player not to be. We'll just figure that out as we go through this week, to what degree and how it works. Everybody will know going in, perhaps except everybody outside, mostly, unless I change my mind on that." So once again, he's playing coy with the media. Might it be possible for the Ravens to go 9-7 and still make the playoffs? It's possible, but they will need to beat conference opponents, the Chargers and the Browns, and get a little help from others. It's also possible, although not likely, that the Ravens could win out and still not make the playoffs if the Miami Dolphins run the table and finish with a better strength of victory. But make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, Lamar Jackson will be the starter. The Ravens' current formula, while not all that exciting to many, provides the best chance for the Ravens to win. He just opens up the running game, and for those who think that Joe Flacco could guide the same rushing attack, we'll explain in a moment why that's just not the case. 4th and 9, like 4th and 12 a year ago, the Ravens tanked on a big play, a game-changing play that had big ramifications. Wink Martindale, he sent his guys after Patrick Mahomes the entire game until it mattered most on 4th and 9. He rushed just 4 guys, one of which was Brandon Williams. I think he'd like to have a do-over on that one. Hayden Hurst, where art thou, Hayden Hurst? The Ravens' first-round pick has 7 catches for 82 yards this season, one of which was a mop-up 26-yard TD catch in Carolina. Given the opportunity cost, namely Derwin James and or DJ Moore, so far, that pick stands out like a Matt Elam. The Ravens host the 5-8 Tampa Bay Bucs this weekend at the Bank. Currently, as I mentioned, they are 8-point favorites. There seems to be a lot of off-the-field noise in Tampa, and at the center of the controversy are Jameis Winston and former Raven Ryan Jensen, who apparently had to be separated on the sidelines by the Bucs offensive line coach. We'll visit with Tom Bassinger from the Tampa Bay Times and get the inside skinny on this and other developments with the Bucs. We'll take a quick time out, but before we do, Matt Waldman, a senior staff writer for Football Guys, walks us through why the Ravens cannot be successful on the ground with Joe Flacco behind center.
Why is Lamar Jackson such an aid to the run game? Take a look at this play as an example here. Kenneth Dixon gets up the field here, gets about 11, 12 yards on the play. Why couldn't Joe Flacco do this? Why wouldn't he be an option? Because when we look at this fake, watch how many players, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 2 linebackers and these 2 defensive backs, they're all waiting here to see if Jackson is going to run to the left side. They're not acting downhill to get to Dixon. On a normal run play, when I say normal, on a run play with Joe Flacco, they're not worried about him running. they're going to basically flow to the ball carrier. So it's going to be more of a they're going to be working more vertically north-south as opposed when it comes to a play-action game. Here they just kind of freeze. Watch how they freeze. They kind of slide up a little bit, but because they're waiting to see if Jackson's going to run outside, each of these guys gets eliminated by a blocker. Even this safety back here, he's not flowing downhill. He's just kind of waiting to see what happens with Jackson and slides outside. That gives Snead a chance to seal him off. That helps at the second level for a guy like Dixon. Also, you get these 2 blocks into the second level here on the linebackers because they're sliding and waiting on Jackson, and that gives a big crease for Dixon to run through. Let's see if we can watch it one more time. All right, see the lineman number 1 here, and they're all kind of waiting here. This guy slides a little bit outside to see if Lamar Jackson's going to go. And guess who comes up? Yep, another lineman right there. This guy's staying outside to contain the Lamar Jackson. There's the wide receiver, seals that off. Even this defensive back is outside to try and contain Jackson. Now has to come back inside, and he's not going to be able to get there except to maybe wrap the legs a little bit. That's what Lamar Jackson gives to a run game, is it forces defenses to hesitate a little bit longer, and they can't attack as aggressively.
Like 33rd Street was to Colt fans, Russell Street will become legendary for future generations of Raven fans. Not only is Russell Street the team's address on Sunday, it's now home to the website voted Baltimore's best 5 years in a row. You've known them as Ravens247.com for years, and now you'll love them as RussellStreetReport.com for many more. There's nothing else like it for Baltimore football fans. Trust me, RussellStreetReport.com. Baltimore's home for football 24/7.
Hi, and welcome back to the Russell Street Report. I'm Tony Lombardi. Joining us now on the Mobile One Hotline from Tampa, Florida, is Tom Bassinger. He covers the Bucs for the Tampa Bay Times. Tom, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Tony.
Hey, my pleasure. Got to ask you, Tom, Kim Basinger was one of my favorite actresses for the obvious reasons back in the day. Any relation?
I wish, man. Unfortunately, no.
No. Okay. Had to get that one off my chest. So,
I get Tom Bassinger a lot too. So thank you for at least getting the Bassinger part right.
Good stuff. It's so far it's been a tumultuous season for the Bucs. And, they started out a little bit hot with Ryan Fitzpatrick, got a little tumultuous with Jameis Winston. He's had his good and bad days. Which quarterback does the team seem to respond to better?
Yeah, that's a good question, and there's no real clear answer to that because there's certain players might prefer one player over the other. We know that Deshaun Jackson, of course, early in the season campaigned a little bit for the Bucs to stick with Fitz. There was that I think NFL Network interview where he said that he'd prefer that the Bucs stick with a hot hand. I think that comment was a little overblown, but it's clear that there was a connection between Jackson and Fitzpatrick that we haven't seen over the past couple of seasons with Winston. But we also know that, for example, Mike Evans and Jameis Winston are pretty tight. I've talked a few times with Mike Evans about their relationship, and he sees it as kind of a LeBron and Dwayne Wade thing. So, we know that they're pretty tightly knit. So, in the end, right, it comes down to who's winning football games. And whoever's winning football games, whoever's doing things that help the overall team. Some guys might have their individual, motivations, but in the end, they're going to want the guy who's going to give them the chance to win.
I seem to recall back when the Tampa Bay Bucs were featured on Hard Knocks that Jameis Winston just seemed like the consummate leader. Was that just for show or for the cameras, or is that pretty much that way in that locker room?
Yeah, I think what we've seen this season is a Jameis Winston that's a little bit more even keel. We saw a lot of the rah-rah stuff in Hard Knocks, and then with the poems and almost like a preacher even. And then it carried through into the regular season. Everybody remembers the Eating W's episode in New Orleans. But since he's toned it down more. He's still a very emotional player. But we've seen, there's no more, pre-game sermons from Jameis Winston. He's a lot more, I'd even use the word calm, it seems.
A guy who's not so calm, and he wasn't calm as a Baltimore Raven, Ryan Jensen. You signed him as a free agent this offseason, and he's had probably an up and down season for the Bucs. Talk about his play on the field. I know he's a feisty player. I think he leads your team in penalties and personal fouls, which is no surprise to Ravens fans. But talk about him as a player, and then describe what happened on that sideline this past Sunday against the Saints when he and Jameis were kind of going at it.
Yeah, the Bucs knew what they were getting with Ryan Jensen, and that's what they felt they needed along the offensive line. They felt like they needed some attitude, a guy who plays with a chip on his shoulder, and they want that, but at the same time they want it to a point, right? You're right. He does lead the team in penalties with 9, and it's cost them, I think, exactly 100 yards. And then there were a couple again this past Sunday. But yeah, that's the type of player he is. He's nasty. He mixes it up. But at a certain point that becomes selfish, and you're doing the team more harm than good. And he has had an up and down season. You'll see times where he can ragdoll defensive linemen, and other moments, they're running right past him. So he's been inconsistent, especially for being the highest paid center in the league. But it's really those penalties that have killed the Bucs, and that's what it seems to me that exchange was about on the sideline on Sunday during the game against. I'm already forgetting who they played against the Saints, yeah. Right? I mean, the stakes are high in that game. The Bucs, however small it was, still have a chance at the playoffs. And it's a division rival, of course. But that episode occurred right after I believe it was an unnecessary roughness penalty by Jensen, and see, the thing with Winston, in my view, that's a bit tricky this season is he's kind of got to walk a fine balance between being a leader and kind of just not getting in guys' faces, because he was suspended for 3 games earlier this season, and that's not on anyone but Jameis Winston. So, he's probably not in a place right now where he can really call guys out, in my view. So, I don't know that that's what came up during that exchange on the sideline. But Jameis Winston's, like I said, he's got to walk a fine balance there. And, they said all the right things after the game. We're both competitors, we're brothers. We had it out and we moved on, that kind of thing. So, I don't expect that to be an issue going forward, but we are at the point in the season where the Bucs are 5-8. Things could be coming off the rails a little bit here with a coach that's on the hot seat.
We're speaking with Tom Bassinger, who covers the Bucs for the Tampa Bay Times. Tom, with regard to Jameis, just one last question with him. Do you think the Bucs exercise that 5th-year option?
If the season ended today, I'd say that they would. The organization, has a lot invested in Jameis Winston. I think they really want to see this work out. Tampa Bay has never had a quarterback play to a second contract. So, I think that they really want to see this thing work. They were burned by the recent allegations and the fallout from that. But again, I think people at the uppermost levels of the organization believe in Winston, and he's shown enough flashes on the football field to make you think that he might be a long-term answer. Maybe eventually be that face of the franchise.
Staying with the Bucs offense, they are 10th in points, first in yards in the NFL. Talk about their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, they no question. They put up a lot of points, a lot of yards. Some of that though is because they're often playing from behind. So they're trying to catch up. And it hasn't been until recently where they've been getting early leads and for the most part holding on to them. That obviously didn't happen this past weekend with the Saints, but it's mainly the success that they've had offensively is mainly due to the passing game. They are. I'd call them one of the top 10 passing offenses in the NFL, but a lot of that's, they get a lot of their yardage through the air. They're not a big yards after catch team, so if they're not hitting those deep bombs, they might struggle to score points. And their run offense is almost non-existent. The run blocking up front, especially on the right side, has been very poor this season. Peyton Barber, whether it's Peyton Barber or Ronald Jones or Jacquizz Rodgers, these guys really have to fight and claw for every single inch on the ground. So, a lot of their offensive success this year has come through the air, and in order for them to beat teams down the stretch here, is going to have to continue to be through the air as much as they might want to establish the run. I think establishing the run is a lost cause at this point.
Speaking of offense through the air, a guy who was a player that a lot of Ravens fans really liked in the draft in 2017. The Ravens chose Marlon Humphrey instead. It was a good choice. However, O.J. Howard was a guy a lot of fans wanted to see in Baltimore. Talk about his performances so far through 1+ seasons, and what do you see for him in the future?
Well, yeah, I'm personally disappointed that we don't get a chance to see him down the stretch here because of foot and ankle injuries, landing him on the injured reserve. But before that happened, he was on the verge of a breakout season. I mean, his rookie season was just okay by rookie season standards, but to me, he was really emerging as one of the next great NFL tight ends, and I think pretty soon here, I don't know whether this conversation's happening elsewhere, but in my mind, soon we'll be talking about him like we're talking about guys like Rob Gronkowski today and maybe Travis Kelce. He's a tremendous weapon in the pass game. You can basically tell him he's such a size mismatch. You can basically tell him, hey, go out, be tall, and we'll get the ball to you. If there's one area where the Bucs would like him to improve, it might be run blocking. But other than that, I'd say when healthy, he's arrived. He's already one of the NFL's best, and I think the Bucs were incredibly fortunate that he fell to them at I believe it was 19. The Bucs. There was some conversation there that the Bucs were interested in Dalvin Cook, the running back from Florida State, who's now with the Vikings. But I don't think there's any question there that when O.J. Howard fell to them, they made the right call. And if there's one or two players that I could only keep on this team going forward, O.J. Howard's one of the first names that would come out of my mouth. Now, with Cameron Brate in for O.J. Howard right now, there's not much of a drop off in the pass game. He's caught 20 passes from Winston since 2015, which is pretty outstanding for a tight end. That's an average of five a season. They've got some pretty good chemistry there. So, and Brake caught a couple of touchdown passes this past Sunday against the Saints. So, I that's one matchup I'd watch for, how the Ravens defend Cameron Brate.
Tom, flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, kind of polar opposites in terms of results from offense to defense. The defense ranks 30th in points allowed, 27th in yards allowed. The Ravens are taking on that defense at M&T Bank Stadium this Sunday. Who are some of the guys that they should be aware of?
Well, that defense there's parts of it, especially in the secondary, that are young. Of course, you've got the veteran Brent Grimes out there, but outside of that, you have Carlton Davis, Jordan Whitehead, MJ Stewart. Those were all guys that they drafted this past April. So I think part of the reason why the defense struggled so early on so much, and was because these rookies were kind of thrown into the fire. And trying to find their footing, and especially in today's pass-happy NFL, the rules, if you're a defensive back, they're not in your favor. So I think that's part of the reason why they struggled. The pass defense was so porous early on, but things are starting to come around, especially with the pass rush. Jason Pierre-Paul has proven to be worth the third-round pick that the Bucs traded to the Giants for him. He leads the team, I believe, with 11.5 sacks. But one guy to keep an eye on that might not be talked about elsewhere very much is a guy that the Bucs picked up before the start of the season when the Browns got him, and that's Carl Nassib. He's been a tremendous find for them, and has maybe even taken some snaps away from Vinny Curry, the free agent they signed in the offseason and who's missed a few games because of injury. But Carl Nassib has been really disruptive, has been harassing quarterbacks. You often see him causing havoc in the backfield. So he's, like I said, he's been a great find for them, and even if a lot of attention will be devoted to JPP, but Carl Nassib's a guy to watch.
Now, isn't he the guy that was the stock analyst and the investment analyst, financial planner for the Cleveland Browns during Hard Knocks?
That's him. That's the guy, the star of Hard Knocks.
He was an interesting guy. So, Tom, shifting gears here, let's talk about the 5-8 Bucs coming into this game. Playoff hopes are really hanging by a thread. Now, there are two types of teams that usually face that situation. Those that want to coast through the balance of the season and those that continue to play hard for their coach. Which of those two teams best describes the Tampa Bay Bucs right now?
Yeah, I think the Bucs are at a tipping point. That loss this past weekend was a really deflating one. They had a golden opportunity to kind of actually, given the Vikings loss last night on Monday night,
right?
Really had a chance to kind of get back into the conversation a little bit, as crazy as it seems. But I haven't seen any signs of this team quitting just yet. So I label them as spoilers. A couple weeks ago, they nearly broke the Panthers. After they beat the Panthers, all of a sudden everyone was speculating about Ron Rivera's job. Cam Newton was so distraught that he wore that leprechaun outfit to the post-game press conference. So, this team, is still clinging to the slim mathematical chance that it can make the playoffs. It's not high, but it's not zero. So I think that's kind of going to be their mentality heading into this weekend. And I haven't seen any signs of them quitting on Dirk Cutter just yet.
So speaking of this weekend, what has to happen? What has to go the Bucs' way for them to steal one from the Ravens?
Well, it's really simple and maybe obvious, but it's turnovers. They live and die by them. If they're not taking the ball away in bunches, they're not winning football games. And that's really been the key, to their kind of late season surge here. I realized they lost last weekend, but part of the reason why they jumped out to that 14-3 lead at halftime was a couple of turnovers. And they had a couple against the 49ers 2 weeks earlier, and then I believe 4 against the Panthers the next week. So if they're not taking the ball away, they're probably not winning this football game, especially against a Ravens defense that to me is one of the better in the NFL, maybe a top 5 defense. So you're going to have to get some extra opportunities. So turnovers.
What's your prediction, Tom?
I think I saw an 8-point spread on this game, that the Ravens were favored by 8.
Yeah, that surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, that seems a little high to me. The Bucs play a lot of close games. I expect it's a little early in the week here, but my guess would be that the Bucs keep this one close, but the Ravens hold on and win.
There he is, Tom Bassinger, covers the Bucs for the Tampa Bay Times. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So we're going to take a quick time out. When we come back, we're going to go inside the castle, get the inside skinny from one winning drive with Todd Karpovich, who covers the team for Russell Street Report. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Russell Street Report. I'm Tony Lombardi. Joining us now via Skype and the Mobile One hotline is Todd Karpovich. He covers the Baltimore Ravens for Russell Street Report. Todd, how are you?
Hey, Tony, how's it going?
I'm doing well, thanks. Hey, I got to ask you a personal question, Todd.
Yes.
When you cover the team, now I've talked to other guys in the media about this, and I can share with you how I'm where I sit on this topic, but are you a fan of the team besides covering the team?
It's a tough balance. It's I had a season ticket since 1999. We still have them. I don't use them, obviously. But I am from Baltimore, so I do root, for the hometown teams. But yeah, I don't. It's a delicate balance. But yes, I do support the Baltimore teams.
So you give up your season tickets, you let somebody else use them while you're in the nice comfy confines of that nice press box eating burgers, chicken, crab cakes, drinking whatever you want to your little heart's content.
It's pretty busy in there. I don't do a whole lot of eating.
All right, let's get down to it with the team. Lamar Jackson, he's injected a lot of excitement into the fan base and obviously in the team. They look pretty excited during the games and on the sideline, particularly after a win. They're 3-1 with Lamar behind center. Talk about how the team has responded to Lamar so far.
They've rallied behind him. In fact, Gus Edwards was talking about his leadership ability. He's a rookie. They're 3-1 behind him. The offense is energetic. It's a different team. So they've really rallied behind him. The offensive line loves the running that they've been able to put together. They went from 22, I think, to number 6 in the league in rushing since Lamar Jackson was the starter. So the team has really rallied behind him, and he's put them in position to make the playoffs. So that's all you can ask for.
Do you sense a higher level of energy with the team than they had with Joe?
Certainly. Yeah, certainly. Lamar brings a new energy. The way he just never know what he's going to do. His explosiveness it's dynamic, and the players see that. And they, and also these long drives he's able to put together is keeping the defense off the field. Keeping them fresh. The offensive line loves the run block. So it's really been a good fit. For the team, especially during the stretch run.
For the past 5 weeks, John Harbaugh has been very coy about naming a starting quarterback. This week is no different as they prepare to take on the Tampa Bay Bucs. Do you think that they'll use Joe Flacco, or can you envision a scenario where Joe Flacco is actually suited up, active for the game, but not the starter?
I do see that scenario. I do know I've heard from several sources that that the locker room is behind Lamar to start. The players. This won't, a lot of guys won't say it publicly. Suggs came out and supported Joe Flacco, to the media a couple weeks ago. But Lamar has universal support of the locker room. Now, I don't think it'd be far-fetched to see Joe Flacco suit up and kind of a role reversal where he comes in for a few plays and throws the ball downfield to John Brown with Lamar running the offense. However, that said, I don't know if Joe would be willing to do that. Maybe it's more prudent for Joe to go on the IR, reset, go into free agency next year and pick up a big contract and make sure he doesn't hurt his value.
Now, full disclosure, Todd, I am a diehard Ravens fan, and I wear that Phantom on my arm like a badge of honor. And it kills me sometimes when I have to cover the team on a Monday after a loss. So when I think back to 4th and 12 last year, losing to the Cincinnati Bengals, foregoing an opportunity to make it to the 2017 postseason dance, it kills me. And it happened all over again, almost with the same amount of pain when they took on the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead. 4th and 9, Todd. Now, Wink Martindale had done a great job the entire game sending the dogs after Patrick Mahomes. I think he was hit more times in that game than he's been hit all season long. And I think it was 14 quarterback hits. They sacked him, 3 times?
Yeah.
So when you take that into consideration, that they were getting after him the entire game, and on the most important play of the game, 4th and 9, you stop them, you win the football game. Todd, they sent 4 guys, and one of them was Brandon Williams. Once again, as a fan, I lost my mind. Come on, man.
Yeah. I just don't
How do you explain that?
I just don't understand it. They sent the thing is they had him. It was just Harbaugh. What he said yesterday, it was kind of just a miraculous kind of play, to be honest with you. So that's what I saw, and it was sort of a fluke play. I mean, he just kind of threw it up there, and somehow, this receiver comes down with a 48-yard pass. It was sort of a different situation than the Bengals scenario because they were in zone there. At least they went after the quarterback. So it was just one of those fluke plays that wound up really costing the game, I think.
A play like that could cost the season. It could cost careers, Todd. It could cost John Harbaugh his job if they don't make the playoffs. So we've talked about this before on this program, and I know it's been a couple of games since. The players continue to play hard for John. But I'll ask a 2-part question. Number one, if the Ravens don't make the postseason, is John fired? And can you see a scenario, the second part of the question, where they actually make the playoffs, but John still does not return in 2019?
Well, when they were on that 3-game losing streak, I thought that it was pretty much sealed that Harbaugh would be looking elsewhere. The voice gets old, and also he's not afraid to do that either. He's going to make big money in the open market. I mean, I'm hearing the Jets really want to throw some big money at him. That said, now they have the 3-game winning streak. They won 3 out of 4. Teams played hard for him all season, and then you have to look who's going to come in here and do a better job than John Harbaugh. That's the thing. There's a lot of talk about Josh McDaniels coming in because he really likes Lamar Jackson, and he's sort of, I don't say quarterback guru, but I think he's been impressed with Jackson, and he can maybe revitalize the offense, more. And then, of course, there's Mike McCarthy. But again, is Mike McCarthy better than John Harbaugh? Who's out there that could be, it's going to do a better job? So I think Bashai is going to take a really long look at this. And then again, I just going to talk to John. Maybe John Harbaugh wants to change. Maybe he wants to go somewhere where he has more of a voice in personnel decisions. There's a lot of intangibles there. Ravens make the playoffs. I think they would offer him an extension. But again, who knows? What the owner's thinking.
It could be one of those mutually parting of the ways where, he says to himself, I need to deliver my message to a new audience. And this has been 11 years. It's been a great run. And maybe he moves on. And Todd, the destination, you mentioned Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy couldn't win with Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he's going to win with Lamar Jackson. But that said, I think that John Harbaugh could be really interested in that Green Bay job. Like you said, he wants more authority. He wants a bigger say, a bigger role. And guess what? They don't have an owner. They have a president.
Yeah, and the thing is, Harbaugh, Harbaugh gets a lot of criticism, but he's sort of been handicapped with this roster. He hasn't really been given playmakers. He went into last year with Ryan Mallett as the training camp quarterback. So I think that's really part of what going forward, what he wants to do. I think he wants a little more say in his personnel and what he could do. And I don't know if he'll get that in Green Bay. It's hard to say. And again, Aaron Rodgers, him and McCarthy butted heads. They're strong-willed guys. And Harbaugh's the strongest-willed guy you're going to meet. So, is that a good fit?
That's true. Good points. And, the situation with John, it's an interesting situation. It's an interesting approach to looking at the offseason. Is it going to be Joe Flacco? Is it going to be John Harbaugh? But there's going to be a lot of change in the Ravens organization for 2019, whether they make the playoffs or not.
Yeah, they need to get younger anyway. They definitely need to get younger. There's a lot of dead money in there. Flacco's going to clear a lot of money off the books. They got a lot of guys over 30 years old. They need to get younger, and there's a lot of cap space. So they could, DeCosta's going to have a lot of flexibility his first year in. So I think there's going to be it's going to be a different Ravens team next year. And again though, this if they don't make the playoffs, and then they finish with 9 wins, 8 wins, they're still in the middle of the pack with the draft. And that's kind of hurt them over the past couple of years. It being that 17-18 pick. You really want to get a high pick, or you want to win. And kind of be or win. So. But again, they're going to be able to free up a lot of money. I think you're going to see a lot of changes in the offseason with the Baltimore Ravens.
Speaking with Todd Karpovich, who covers the Baltimore Ravens for Russell Street Report. Todd, with respect to the draft war room, you mentioned draft picks. I've been hearing things that speak to I'll say it's somewhat of speculation, but I've heard it from a couple of different people, that Steve Bisciotti really wanted the Ravens to draft offensive players last season when they were on the clock in 2018. Are you hearing anything like that? Because the obvious pick there, and to me it was an obvious Raven pick, and I've been beating this like a dead horse. Derwin James playing for the San Diego Chargers could have been a Baltimore Raven, but because the team wanted to emphasize offense, perhaps in part to appease a fan base that said they desperately needed it and needed playmakers, they still went offense, but they still didn't get that playmaker. Hayden Hurst.
You're right.
Hayden Hurst has done absolutely nothing. What's he got? 7 catches for less than 100 yards?
Yeah, and you're right about the Derwin James. They would have been perfect. And the best tight end they drafted in the 3rd round, on the roster. I don't know. I guess that was sort of the thinking. And I know the owner wanted Lamar Jackson. I know that came from upstairs, that pick. And that was, that might wind up being a steal, or they got him. But yeah, I think there was a movement toward getting offensive players, and they might have dropped the. You can't really evaluate the draft for a couple years. But true. Again, Mark Andrews has outplayed Hayden Hurst, and they got Mark Andrews in the 3rd round.
Yeah, and Hayden Hurst wasn't even he wasn't even targeted against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and he wasn't rated as the best tight end in the draft.
Right. So the Ravens are hosting the Tampa Bay Bucs at M&T Bank Stadium this Sunday. They are listed, Todd, a surprising 8-point favorite against the Bucs. How do you see this thing playing out?
I think the Ravens cover that spread. I think the Bucs quit. They're going to come in here. It's going to be cold. They're not playing for anything. The Ravens have everything in front of them. So I think the Ravens dominate that game. Interesting game is, Thursday night is Kansas City, San Diego. If Kansas City wins that game, they wrap up the West, and San Diego is pretty much locked into that 5th wild card spot.
Correct.
So how much did he bring to the Ravens on that Saturday night? That's going to be the big game. The Ravens can win that game, then they're going to be in a great position to make the postseason.
Yeah,
barring a collapse against the Browns in the final.
It will be an interesting game, Todd, with respect to if the Chargers do lose on Thursday night and they're locked into that 5th slot in the postseason dance. They've got nothing to play for. It'll be interesting to see how they play it out for the rest of the season. If that was game 16 and not 15, maybe they call off the dogs and the Ravens can get a gimme there. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out on December 22nd on Saturday night when the Ravens take on the Chargers.
Yeah, and if they said the Chargers beat the Chiefs, though, they got everything in front of them. That's going to be a tough game.
Right. Here it goes. Todd Karpovich covers the Baltimore Ravens for Russell Street Report. Todd, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
We're going to take a quick time out. When we come back, we'll recap the show and talk about next week. Don't go away.
Like 33rd Street was to Colt fans, Russell Street will become legendary for future generations of Raven fans. Not only is Russell Street the team's address on Sunday, it's now home to the website voted Baltimore's best 5 years in a row. You've known them as Ravens247.com for years, and now you'll love them as RussellStreetReport.com for many more. There's nothing else like it for Baltimore football fans. Trust me, RussellStreetReport.com. Baltimore's home for football 24/7.
Thanks for joining us today on the Russell Street Report. Be sure to check us out on RussellStreetReport.com. I'd also like to thank Tom Bassinger from the Tampa Bay Times, as well as Todd Karpovich, who covers the Ravens for Russell Street Report. Be sure to subscribe to Fanimal Radio on iTunes and YouTube. Also follow us on Russell Street Report on Twitter at Russell Street Report, as well as myself at RSR Lombardi. But before we leave you, we'd like to share an interesting picture which in a twisted way captures the essence of being a Ravens fan at this time. On behalf of all of us at Russell Street Report and Fanimal Radio, thanks for tuning in. Join us next week as we visit with the Chargers beat writer and Harley Sherman, who covers the Ravens for Pro Football Focus. Until then, enjoy your week, everyone, and happy holidays.